Hello, everyone, and welcome. Come on in. Good to see you. Connect to audio, connect to video. Let's see. Can people hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. I don't see you. Is that somebody who can hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Lovely. Okay, it's working. Great.
But I don't know where. Oh, there's my video.
All right, so people are coming on in. This is the federal oral exam coffee hour, sort of impromptu, decided to throw it last minute. Thank you for signing in. I believe we're expecting more people, but we'll go ahead and get started and let people straggle on as they see fit. Let me just see. I see I have a Sonia. Sonia, can I make you co-host and then you can admit people if I don't see them coming in? Awesome. Thank you for letting me put you totally on the spot. Make co-host. All right, so you can admit people or not, but hopefully please do. All right. Okay. So, thank you for joining me. Basically, I just wanted to get together with all of you and talk a little bit about the federal exam because now's the time to start thinking about it. A month before it happens is not the right time to start thinking about it. So yes, now is the right time. I saw a bunch of you signed up, which is awesome. I'm recording this, so if you speak, you will be recorded as well, and then I'll share it with those colleagues who weren't able to join us. You're all muted right now. I assume you all know how to mute yourselves and unmute yourselves because we've been on Zoom for a long time now. So please keep yourselves muted unless you speak and then mute afterwards. And I would love it for all of you to talk too. I'm going to talk for a little while, but then I'm going to open the floor to all of you. Please be concise. I might cut you off if you start rambling. Not because I don't love you, but just so that other people can have a word in edgewise as well. So try to keep your interventions to maybe less than 45 seconds. And keep your webcams on if you can so we can see your lovely face. So basically what we're going to do is go over a little bit of the federal exam, and I'm going to share some of my tips with you, some of my resources, and then I'll open it up to all of you for some conversation. And that's how things are going to go. For now, if you have comments or questions, feel free to type them in the chat and I'll keep an eye on it. And then as things go later, maybe we can open the mic, especially if it stays a pretty small group. All right, cool. So getting to know you. Let's just take a moment to introduce ourselves. Where are you? First of all, I'm going to stop my share so I can participate in the chat. Where's everyone calling in from? I'm currently in Western New York. I'm usually in Montreal, but I'm on the road, so I have a different background from normal. Is there a chat? Yeah. Yeah, feel free to type in the chat where you're located right now. DC, cool. Is it hot there right now? No. Awesome. Minnesota, awesome. Boise, Idaho. Boulder, Colorado. Ooh, I might go there soon. Savannah, Georgia. Nice. Is it hot there?
It's crazy humid.
I believe you. Yikes. All right, cool. How many times have you tried the exam before? You can put 0, you can put 1. You get special points if you've tried it at least 3 or 4 times. All right, we've got a 2, a 1, a 0. Nice. 2, 2. Awesome. 1. Cool. I've told this story before. Some of you have probably heard it. The time that I took the federal exam, somebody was taking it for her 5th time, and she passed that year, which I find to be a great inspiration because it means if she had quit after her 4th try, which would have been understandable, she never would have made it, but she kept trying. So it's good to see all of you here who have maybe done it before. And to those of you who have never done it before, awesome. You can go in with no preconceived ideas about how it'll go. It's really hard, but you know, you can do it. Okay, so, ooh, the written exam got a 79. You have to get an 80. All right. Well, we're going to be mostly talking about the oral exam. You are welcome to stay. Hopefully you'll be able to take it soon once you've just gotten that 1 point for the written, which is very frustrating. So what's one word that comes to mind when you think of the federal exam? Tough, intimidating, brutal. nerves, daunting, fast. Okay, interesting. So those are all good words. A couple of them are like technique, technical, standardized. Okay, it's interesting. So I think that our two categories here are the actual technical skills required to, be that level of interpreter and pass the test. And then on the other side, we have our nerves, which, the intimidation, the daunting, somebody I think even put nerves. Yeah. So that's huge, and in my opinion, absolutely part of studying for the federal, because it's yes, it's absolutely interpreting skills. You can't pass it without them, but you also have to be ready to feel nervous on the day of the exam, to get jittery, to miss a word, and then how are you going to deal with that? And it's a lot about managing your anxiety, which is great because I'm a very anxious person, so I've learned a lot about how to manage my anxiety by trying to study for this exam and others like it. So welcome to anybody who just came in. Feel free to turn your webcams on so we can all feel like we're in the same room together. Okay, there's the comment, must train as in for a marathon. Indeed. It really, that's what it takes. And that's why I'm convening you all now in August when it's still kind of summer, because now is the time to start planning. I'm not expecting any of you to start studying tomorrow, but I would imagine that by September, you will have a plan that you can then implement that will carry you through to February, right? Maybe you want to start in October, but definitely not later than that. You need at least 3 months of really hard, solid studying. Even like if I were to go back and take it again, I would need at least 3 months of serious, solid studying. There's technique and there's vocabulary and there's things that you just can't train overnight. Okay, so let me go back to where we were. Let me see. Okay, so I haven't really introduced myself. So hi, everyone. I'm Athena. I am a federally certified interpreter, and I also have a bunch of other credentials. I'm a healthcare interpreter, a court interpreter for Spanish and French, and last year I got my master's degree in conference interpreting. So it's been a long road of lots and lots of studying, potentially sometimes more studying than interpreting. So I can speak to the studying very well. And what I do now is I have my company, Athena Sky Interpreting, and I offer webinars and I train people on various levels and degrees of certification. So that's what I do, and I interpret, and I'm working on getting my foot in the door in the conference world. So that's kind of cool as well. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. But basically my journey toward federal certification was basically pushy colleagues who were like, Athena, you should take this test. And I was like, why? I just took the other test because I had been, they call it New Jersey approved, but I'd been certified as first a conditionally approved interpreter and then as a master approved interpreter, and was like, I don't need to keep going. But I don't know. I guess I'm very influenceable. So when my colleague told me I had to take this exam, I did. And I started with the written and then I passed it. And don't get me wrong, I was very happy that I passed it. But I was a little bit like, oh, now what have I done to myself? Because once you pass the written, then you have to start studying for the oral. So I did. What I did is actually, and I would recommend all of you to utilize your colleagues as much as possible. I started a study group, which was as much for my own benefit as theirs because it held me accountable. So, I was reporting to this group, telling them what I was doing to study, asking them to report back to me. And so we had check-ins, we shared glossaries, we formed a book club, and we were able to pool our resources and help each other out. And that was really, really good. I also studied my butt off, mostly with the ACEBO materials, every single one of them. Also with the University of Arizona materials, which include a lot of expert witness testimony. And what I can do and probably will do after this is over is send out an email to all of you, and I can list those resources. They're also on my website in the resources section, but I highly recommend them for their, they come with the transcripts of what the people are actually saying, so you can really look and see what it is that you're getting right and that you're getting wrong, and be really detailed about it, because that is the key to passing this exam, is understanding exactly what type of mistakes you're making and what you're doing well. All right, so I'm going to just share some general exam tips. I'm going to walk you through the exam a little bit, give you some more resources, and then I'll open the floor to all of you. I don't expect, I'll certainly be done within the hour. I'm allotting an hour and a half for our little coffee hour. Let me see. I think there's some more people. There we go. All right. Okay, so just general exam tips, and I know one of you said at least you're going to have to take the written exam again. This applies to the written as well as the oral, and pretty much any exam you ever take. Stop introducing new material a week or so before the test. It becomes not useful anymore, and it just starts to stress you out. You'll just realize all of the things that you still don't know, because guess what? You're never going to be able to learn everything. So I recommend this, and others will as well. Stop introducing new material a week or so before the test. Stop studying a few days before the test. That's why you're studying in September, so that you can stop a few days before the test. Cramming is not going to help. What you can do is take care of your physical health. Eat well, sleep well, get exercise. It will help your brain, it will oxygenate you, it will keep your energy up, and it will keep your stamina and endurance, because this really is like training for a marathon. Granted, you know, it's a mental marathon, but it's still a marathon. All right. Know the route to where your testing center is and plan to get there early. So plan to arrive there a half an hour early and then plan for traffic. But definitely don't make stressing out because you might be late part of your nerves on exam day. Find out everything you can about the test in advance. Know what to expect, but then roll with the punches. So you want to know what the test is going to look like. You want to know the ins and the outs and what you'll be allowed and what you won't. But there's always going to be something that the proctor says or does that is not what you were expecting. And that can't be the thing that throws you off. So you really have to be able to get to know what it's going to look like and then just decide, okay, now it's going to be what it is and I'll do my best no matter what. This last tip I think might be the most important one, which is remember that there's always a margin for error and one mistake won't kill you. I'll say that again. There is always margin for error. One mistake will not kill you. Seriously. Because what happens to a lot of people, and this is like across the board on interpreting tests, is that they will be doing great. Everything's awesome. They're remembering all the things that they studied. It's great. And then they hit one thing that doesn't go well, and then it starts to spiral. And now instead of being present and focusing on the what they're doing right now in this moment, they're remembering the thing and they're worried that they didn't say the right thing and they're racking their brain. No, it's done. It's gone. It was one mistake. You have a 20% isn't it 20 25? I'm not off the top of my head, I can't remember. I think you have to get an 80 on the oral, but then I thought it was 75 on the written, and then now the chat comment is confusing me. In any case, you have at least a 20% margin for error, which means that you can actually make 10 or 20 mistakes, more than that. I counted one time. So the point is you can make a lot of mistakes. I'm not advocating that you do make the mistakes. Believe me, you'll do it on your own without my encouragement. But the point is that you don't have to be perfect. It's not looking for perfection. And if you freak out because you're not perfect, then that can derail your entire test experience. So I recommend that you pay attention to that last tip for sure. All right, my chat has disappeared. That's okay. I'm just going to keep going for now. Actually, no, I'm going to stop to see what was going on in the chat. Okay, so Michelle says, my recommendation, if it's at a hotel, stay in that hotel no matter how much it costs. Yeah, that's a good recommendation. You know, unless you're very close by and you know, but the point is minimize the stress. Do everything you can to minimize stress on exam day and near exam day. All right, back to my thing. So this is the know the test part, okay? So you should understand that it's broken down into different sections. There's a site translation, and here, sometimes I do this as a little guessing game, but I'm just gonna give it to you. So the length of the documents are about 230 words, okay? That's what you'll be dealing with. You are given 5 minutes total for review and rendering of your site translation. The maximum time permitted for review is 1.5 minutes. So you can review for 1.5 minutes. I do recommend that you make sure that your proctor is going to tell you when that 1.5 minutes is up. Then I recommend that you take all the time necessary to, or that you take that full advantage of that 1.5 minutes to review. I'm going to go into more detail at the end of the month. I'll be hosting FCIC a tips and tricks webinar, and we'll be going into more detail about what to do with all of this. But yeah, basically you really want to use your time effectively with site translation. So there's 22 scoring units in the English to Spanish, and then 22 more from Spanish to English, which means that out of the entire test, the sight translation carries the least amount of weight, but it does not mean that it's not important. You should still very much study for it, especially because those are points that you could easily get if you do well. The types of documents that you'll find for English into Spanish, usually you'll see things like police reports, pre-sentencing investigation reports, or affidavits. And then Spanish into English, things like notarized affidavits, legal documents, educated letters. P.S. I'm getting all this information from the test website where they have a big manual and it's literally straight out of there. So read that manual because it'll help you to familiarize yourself with the test and just feel comfortable on the day of the exam. So that's sight translation. Simultaneous. There are two simultaneous on the oral exam. One of them is a monologue. It's a jury address. So maybe it's an opening statement or a closing statement. It's going to have high and low register. It lasts about 7 minutes long. And it's at a speed of 120 words per minute. So those of you who are state certified understand what that speed is like because that's the speed that you had for your state certification exam. It's very similar. And in fact, yeah, this part is very similar and the consecutive is very similar. I would say the sight translation is generally speaking harder than what you'll find on a state exam, and the next simultaneous version is also more challenging. Now you'll see this one has 65 scoring units. So all told, sight translation, English to Spanish and Spanish to English just had 44. Now just with this simultaneous, we see 65 more, okay? Basically what ends up happening is they tally up the total number of points you could have gotten, and then they see how many scoring units you actually got. And then if you're within a certain percentage, you either pass or fail. Consecutive is about 18 minutes long. It's 875 to 925 words, but you're not going to be counting. And this one has 76 scoring units, so it's pretty important. And here I think is where most people really need to work, because consecutive is where we lose scoring units because we lump information together, we omit information, we change information, and we don't even realize we're doing it because we don't record ourselves and or we don't compare that recording to the transcript. So this is really where you're going to need to work and see where it is that you're starting to go off in the wrong direction and how you can correct that. So type of language that it's going to have: cross-examination, low register, profanity. So you do have to be prepared for that. You know, for this exam, it's not a test of vocabulary. It is a test of skill and technique, and also keeping it together on exam day. It's a test of that as well. But you do need to have your vocabulary. You need to be able to have high register and low register language. There are 2 repetitions allowed, which is the same as on your state exam. The only thing that's maybe a little more challenging about this than the state exam is that it's shorter. So if you take too long between utterances to answer, to give your rendering, you may run out of time. I will tell you that on my exam, I ran out of time. So I didn't get to the end. I think that it was just a couple sentences missing, but I'll never know because I wasn't able to finish it. And I still passed. So if that happens to you and you run out of time in the consecutive section, don't just decide that everything's ruined and, you know, really just stay present, keep going, and try not to dwell on it. Because if I'd have let that throw me off, then I would have bombed my simultaneous and then I would have failed. Okay, so yes, it's a little bit shorter of a time limit, and that's okay. Approximately how long the longest utterance will be: 50 to 60 words. I have looked for confirmation from authority figures on the subject. That's as close as I've gotten, is 50 to 60 words. But that's about what you have to be prepared for the state as well. And then there's one last section, which is the expert witness simultaneous, which is probably the scariest section, although it's only 35 scoring units. So that's good to keep in mind. Like, don't kill yourselves, and just realize that it's still not a test of vocabulary. It's a test to see how well you can keep up with fast simultaneous and think on the spot. And then if you miss a couple words here or there, you still will get a bunch of the scoring units. So it's 5 minutes long, 600 words, and it's 160 words a minute. So here it's a lot faster than the monologue section that we saw earlier. And part of the reason why I recommend the University of Arizona materials is because they allow you to play things at different speeds. Interpretrain's materials also allow you to play things at different speeds. So if you are looking for play with speeds, go with those two materials. The types of topics that are covered. So evidence from law enforcement or experts like DNA, computer forensics, firearms, drugs, serology, etc. And that's that. Are there any questions in the chat before I keep going? Any questions on what we've covered so far? Okay, so what are those University of Arizona materials specifically? They have different options. They used to be called interpret tapes. When I bought them, they were called interpret tools. I will double check the link and I'll include them in my follow-up email when I follow up with all of you. Any other questions on what we've just gone over? Okay. All right, and the interpret train, I also don't know the specific name of their materials, but I think they have a specific package that's for federal court interpreting, and it'll have a lot of relevant materials, including differences with speed. Do they always present the sections in the same order? I think so. I believe it was cite, English, Spanish, and then cite, Spanish, English, and then simultaneous monologue, and then consecutive, and then simultaneous expert. That's been my experience. I'm seeing some nods here. I think everybody who's done it maybe. Okay. All right. So I think that tends to be it. So cite translation, simultaneous, the slower version, consecutive, and then simultaneous, the faster version. Again, you can go in prepared for that, but don't freak out if it turns out it's in a different order. What I remember is that the 160, the hardest simultaneous, is at the end when you are the most tired. I remember that too. And honestly, like, I do this thing. I don't recommend you do it, but I'm sure we all do it, where I torture myself as I'm leaving the exam site. So I'm like replaying in my head all the things that I missed. And I'm like, oh, I didn't say this and I said that, but I couldn't have said that. I'm seeing some very serious nods. So don't do it, but you will. And I remember leaving the exam site and thinking that I'd bombed that section. And I really do wish we were able to see, because we don't know how we do for each section. We just know if we passed or failed, but hopefully I didn't bomb it as terribly as I thought that I had. So yeah, it's a challenging section, and a lot of you're going to want to study vocabulary and technique and look at your strengths and weaknesses, but you're also going to want to just practice doing really hard material that you definitely won't be able to render perfectly, and just keep it up and keep going and do well given the circumstances. That's something you want to actually practice, so that on exam day, when they throw you things that you're not expecting, you have coping mechanisms and strategies. Cool. All right. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so specifically for the oral exam, my recommendation is start studying now, or, in September. I'll give you till September. And remember, it's not a test about vocabulary, it's a test about technique. That said, yes, now is the time, like when you're not super pedal to the metal crazy studying, now is the time to make sure that your Spanish and English skills are really up to snuff, and that you're getting exposed to all sorts of different language, whether it's profanities or high register legalese or expert witnesses. Now's the time to make sure that you understand the different pieces in a firearm. Now's the time to understand what happens with DNA. Like, do some investigation into different topics that could come up on the federal exam, but don't spend every single minute of the day doing that from now until February, because it's more about being able to really understand the concept and then render it properly with a baseline knowledge of vocabulary. But you also can't expect that you'll get every single vocabulary word that comes up on the test, and they're not expecting you to either. A lot of those scoring units are going to be really easy. They're going to be things like date of birth or last name or mother-in-law, things that you know how to say, but that you might omit under pressure. Okay. So you're going to want to use your study materials efficiently, which means record yourself and identify weaknesses and strengths, and then do it again. I don't care what class I'm ever teaching on interpreting, that's always going to be the thing. Always. And think outside the box, find ways to address your specific weaknesses. So you want to think like a detective, be really clear with yourself about what it is that you're doing well and what it is that you could improve, and then figure out how to improve it. So it may be that you need to take an extra note-taking class, or it may be that you really do need to memorize some baseline vocabulary, or that you have to work on your visualization skills, but just do the things that will specifically address the problems that you have. I advise studying terminology using Quizlet.com or an application like it. It allows you to upload your glossaries and then generate games and quizzes using their system. And it's a way to interact and participate as opposed to just having your eyes glaze over while you're looking at a glossary, which is very ineffective. But it's how most of us study vocabulary. So use interactive methods that have you listening or saying or looking, just using different parts of your brain to be able to internalize the vocabulary. And most importantly, learn it in context. And this is advice that I give and have to remind myself as well, because the temptation is always to just be like, oh, DNA, I should download a DNA glossary and then memorize the DNA terms. But if I don't understand DNA, then those terms aren't going to stick. I need to be able to understand it. My brain has to have something for it to stick to. So it's much better for you to go on, learn about DNA, read about it, watch it in English and then in Spanish, and then try to memorize that vocabulary using interactive methods. I think I saw something in the chat. Any recommendations on best study material or classes? Okay, yes, that's going to be some of the slides coming up. And hopefully you'll pardon me if I plug a couple of my classes, but I'll also recommend other people as well. So resources. So these are the places that I recommend. So this is InterpreTrain. Many of you know Virginia Valencia. She's awesome. And she has created some really stellar study materials. And they have this whole online platform that you can use where you can actually upload your recording and then follow along with your version while you're looking at the transcript online. So it's really clever, and she has every single vocabulary unit known to humanity and different ways of studying it. So that's InterpreTrain. She was also the one that I mentioned. They have different speeds. So I highly recommend InterpreTrain. They also offer classes. I don't know if they're doing anything specific to the federal exam at this time. I mean, she and I are partnered together offering a master class in the fall, but it's full. So that one's not going to be one that I'm going to be talking about in detail tonight. I don't know if she's doing any others. Acebo is another one that you've probably seen before. They have Edge 21 and Interpreter's Edge and the Turbo Edition. I recommend all of them. The Turbo is harder than the actual exam. The Turbo is crazy hard. So you might use that one just to be your like, okay, I'm going to keep my cool no matter what one. Don't get discouraged if you can't do it, because honestly, nobody can do it. It's really hard. University of Arizona is the one I was mentioning earlier. Again, that comes with 2 different speeds, and there's a lot of expert witness stuff there. So that's why I like those materials. I believe it's called the Interpret Tools. I will double check when I send my follow-up email. That's the question in the chat. My experience in federal court is that it has many terms specific to federal that we don't hear in day-to-day courts. Is there a resource that provides access to that vocabulary? So yes, probably. And I can look into what I have. I think actually the Southern District of New York has their own online terminology. I don't know what you call it, like kind of glossary. Like they have their own term bank. However, honestly, you don't need to get that technical. If you know how to say prosecutor and attorney and judge and trial, and like if you know how to generally interpret legalese, you don't have to get super technical for federal legalese. That's been my experience. I don't want to lead you astray. It's possible there'll be a couple of things that come up, but it's really not a test on crazy federal legalese. It's more the legalese that comes up is stuff that you'll have usually seen before if you interpret in state court. Do I offer continuing education credits for California and my courses? I do, yes. And I believe that all the ones for this fall have been approved, but I will have to double check that. But I'm working on approvals for all of the fall classes, and California is on the list. Which brings me to Athena Sky Interpreting. So that's me. And I offer at a limited basis. I'm not going to have a ton of slots, but you can apply via my website to have private coaching, where we have one-on-one and I give you feedback based on your renditions and I really tailor it to you. And then I also offer monthly webinars where I look at a different topic each month. And this month is going to be a special. That's going to be the federal, the FCICE oral exam tips and tricks. So I'm excited about that. And maybe some of you will want to join me for that one. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. So if you go to my website, which has been recently done and it's all fancy now, I'm very excited. Plus it matches my outfit, which is really important. So I have blogs on all aspects of interpreting, a lot of free resources, glossaries that I've come up with. The study group that I created back in the day, Federal Interpreters or Bust, they gave me permission to post our audio glossaries on my website. So we went through a bunch of different stuff. We have DNA glossaries, glossaries on, I think, wills and foreclosures and just random topics where we did gather a whole bunch of information. And those are in audio glossaries so that you can listen to the term and then say it out loud. So feel free to visit my website and check out the resources section. Let me see. Do you have a monthly subscription is the question in the chat. I don't have a monthly subscription. No, it's basically like each month that there is a webinar. I'll think about it. That's an interesting thought. But for right now, it's just one webinar each month, and then the private coaching and small group coaching as well. Okay. So this is the one that is most applicable to all of you, and the early bird pricing is in effect until this coming Sunday, and that's the federal oral exam tips and tricks. Okay, and so what we're going to be doing there is we're going to be looking at tips for each section of the exam. We will talk about study planning, and we will practice. And if there's anything specific that you're like, oh, I really want to work on this, I always send an email out to anybody who's signed up, at least by the early bird. Like I'll probably send this email out sometime next week where I say, hey, thank you for signing up. Is there anything specific you'd like us to cover in this webinar? So I really try to individualize it to the participants. Okay. Generally that was just for Spanish interpreters because there isn't a federal exam for other languages, but then all languages are welcome to join me for these sessions this fall. And some of you might find these helpful because they're technique based. So there's an ethics webinar in September where we're going to be talking about real life situations and things that come up and how they sort of conflict with the code of ethics and what are we supposed to do in those situations. So it's a little bit more practical. And then in October, we're going to be doing a deep dive into consecutive interpretation. So we're really going to be talking about skill and technique there. In November, we're going to be doing a note-taking module. And then in December, we're going to be doing a simultaneous workshop. And so those are specific to those different modes. And there's a lot of practice. And similar to the other one, each time I teach one of these, a week and a half or so in advance, I send out an email asking people what they'd like to be included. And then I do try to incorporate that into the final presentation. You can see here CEUs are either approved or pending in Pennsylvania, Idaho, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Florida, Washington, Ohio, Colorado, Texas, and more. I have a lovely lady who has been helping me with that because it's a bunch of paperwork. So if you don't see your state there, it's because paperwork, but you can reach out and we will try to accommodate you. Also, if anyone wants severe discounts on attending classes and feels like they're a social media guru who wants to help me with marketing and outreach, send me an email. I'm hiring. Not joking. I really need somebody. Let me know. All right. So for all of you here in attendance and those of you watching the recording, I'm offering a $10 discount, which is valid until this Sunday. And you can just put it right into the website whenever you purchase any of the products I just mentioned, which is Coffee 10. So that is your key to $10 savings. All right. I think that's about everything. I do run a bunch of different Facebook groups, and I find those to be really helpful for networking and motivation and sharing resources and ideas. The one that I really recommend you all join, but you're probably already on it, is Future Fedes, because that's where you're going to find your colleagues who are all in the same boat. They're probably looking for study buddies, which is one thing that I didn't mention and I should have. Really, study buddies are really, really helpful. Having somebody, especially if you compare with somebody who has a opposite native language to yours, that can be really helpful, and they'll keep you going with just motivation and keeping you accountable, and also they'll notice things that maybe you're not noticing. the other Facebook groups, Athena Sky Interpreting. If you happen to interpret French, I have French Interpreting Corner. And then there's the certification or bust. And then Tony Valle out in California has his resource center, which has got like 2,500 members. And so, you know, you don't have to go on and even say anything at all, but you can see the conversations that happen and stay up to date. And you'll know when tests have been postponed or when laws have changed. And it's just helpful to be part of these groups. There's a question in the chat as to the oral exam. It's currently what they're saying is that it'll be at the end of February. So not in December. I think that back in the day, there was something about December. There's a question about tips on how to study as a group or with a buddy. I actually wrote a blog on that. I will try to remember to include it in my follow-up email to all of you. But yes, I do have, I mean, you have to find the right person. You have to find the right fit and you have to know what it is that you're looking for. So I look for feedback. I want somebody to listen to me. I want them to be honest and I want them to be good at hearing and being able to give me that feedback. And so what I would recommend is that, you know, you do your outreach and you try to find somebody and then you just schedule like one time to meet and get to know each other with no promises. And then afterward, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, no hard feelings, like don't feel obligated now to study with them for the next 4 months. But if you click, it can be really helpful. And that's how I studied for my French court certification, where I had somebody who I knew a lot more about interpreting technique and she knew better French than me. So she was able to help me with my French. I was able to help her with her technique. And just the fact that we're meeting twice a week kept us accountable. So it really depends on what you're looking for. And I recommend studying on your own too. I think that you doing both things is really helpful. And, you know, if you don't like studying with others, then you don't have to. But if you think it might help to have somebody hold you accountable or to give you the kind of feedback that you're not able to give yourself, then I would recommend, you know, looking for somebody who's a good fit. And you can do that online. This is actually before the pandemic that I studied online with somebody who I'd never even met in person. So yeah. All right. That is all for me. So I'm going to end here. I'll stop talking. And I wanted to open the floor to all of you. If you'd like, I think we're a small enough group that we could turn on our microphones if we're respectful and don't hog the floor. But let me just see what's happening in the chat and then we'll go there. So there's a question, where does the AOC post updates about scheduling the exam? Does anybody have the website? I'll look for it while maybe others are typing their questions in. Let me see, because it's not the AOC. If you Google FCICE, which I'm doing now, then I'll share and show you what I'm doing. All right, so here we have FCICE, and the first thing that comes up is this, which is uscourts.gov. And then when you go down to phase 2 oral examination, at the very bottom, there's this link, learn more about the oral examination. This is just Googling FCICE. Then it tells you you're leaving their website. And now we're here with Prometric. So now I'm going to copy that link and I'll put it in the chat and that's where you're going to go. All right, there was a private message to me, which is what is my native language and how did I learn other languages? And the answer to that is my native language is English and I learned my other languages because I'm a big language dork. And I took Spanish as a required class in community college and totally fell in love with it and decided to make it my major at Rutgers University and then just bungled my way through it and made tons of mistakes until I moved to Honduras after graduating college and became somewhat fluent and then kept on studying. So yeah, that's where my Spanish came from. And my French was similar, but it's been more arduous and we have more of a love-hate relationship with each other. All right. Any other questions or comments or resources to share or recommendations? And I don't mind, I know I'm here with my company and I've been honest about that, but I don't mind if you recommend other people and other classes, I won't be offended. Anyone? Anything? Michelle, you have your, oh yeah.
This is not a recommendation or anything. I was just wondering, as a baseline or average, how many hours a day do you think we need to study? At least an hour or a couple?
My recommendation minimum would be 3 months of solid study, 3 to 4 days a week, 2 hours a day. That's like minimum. Yeah. So I'm basically recommending about 8 hours a week for 3 months. And it's better if you start sooner. And like I said, you can have your sort of contextual vocabulary stuff happening now, along with anything you have to improve about your note taking, because notes are going to take longer to improve. You can't just change those skills overnight. So you sort of lay the groundwork now, and then about 3 or 4 months before the exam, you start with a really rigid routine. And you don't go crazy. I've had people who are like, I'm going to study 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And those people, in my experience, last approximately 3 days.
It's like a diet.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to cut out all food, but you do want to pick a realistic diet.
Thank you.
Sure. There's another question in the chat, but I also see Michelle's hands up. So why don't you go ahead and then I'll answer the chat.
Well, I was just going to say that I recently discovered Court TV. I don't know if you all have it in your area, but you can also get it online. And even though like they'll have witness testimony, which we would normally do consecutively, but you're not going to get them to stop for you on TV. I just use it for simultaneous. I just sit there in my living room and do simultaneous while they're going. Right now they have the Robert Hearst trial, and it's been great for practicing.
Awesome. Thank you. Court TV. Cool. If any of you want to email me your recommendations too, then I can compile them and put them on my follow-up email. So I have to remember that, and I have to remember the thing that I've already forgotten. Oh, my blog on working with a study buddy. Okay. All right. There's another question, which is any tips on how to improve speed in Simo? So yeah, I do. And that's going to be something I'll be covering in our December workshop, but obviously then it'll just be a couple months away. But do come to that if you're looking for improving your speed. But basically across the board, I recommend shadowing. And because shadowing is when you repeat in the same language, you're listening and speaking at the same time. You start with something that's going maybe, let's say 120 words per minute, and then you speed it up and you go faster and you go faster. And you're literally training your brain to be able to keep up at a certain pace. The other thing you can then do is interpret something and raise the speed. And there is an app, actually it was Virginia Valencia from InterpretTrain who introduced me to it, that does increase your speed. So you can actually take a file, place that file in this, it's a website. So you just basically plop it in and then you can control it. You can slow it down and you can speed it up. So shadowing at different speeds and interpreting at different speeds is really helpful for increasing speed in simultaneous. Sonia, go ahead.
For just vocabulary, one thing that's helped me a lot has been on Netflix. There are a lot of shows in both English and Spanish about either court proceed, like there's the whole show about the O.J. Simpson trial. What's the one? There's one Mexican one where she plays the first lady of Mexico on the run, and that one had actually quite a bit of legal vocabulary. So I think just TV shows on Netflix, in Spanish or English that are about like, police officers or something like that. Like I watched the O.J. Simpson entire series just to improve my legal vocabulary, and it was incredibly entertaining and also educational.
See, that's awesome. And that's the kind of groundwork you can lay now while you're doing your studying light. But that was actually something, it was part of what I did with my Federal Interpreters or Bust study group. We actually had a book club where we read books, like we read La Reina del Sur together, which provided lots and lots of slang, swearing, and also just tons of like weapons and guns and drugs terminology in context, while being highly entertaining, if you can call it that. Michelle says, Taco Chronicles is great for Mexican slang and profanity, and it's interesting. Cool, I'm gonna add that. I'm making a list now of things that I'll include in that follow-up email. Yeah, anything else? Any other questions or recommendations or requests? I don't know, if you're looking for partners and that kind of thing. can you do the book club again or recommend any books? I would love to do that book club again. I cannot promise, however, because I have promised myself I'm trying not to overextend myself. This is challenging when you're in Athena. So I'm making no promises unless I I don't know, review them 5 times before I say yes to them. However, I do think that La Reina del Sur was a good one. I'll type it into the chat. La Reina del Sur. We also read another one in English about a gang member. And I always forget that. I think it was called The Boxer, maybe. There's a question about resources for improving note-taking, and then Yadira has a question. So for improving note-taking, yes, I highly recommend Interpretrain's note-taking manual. It's really good. And basically it walks you through different drills for symbols and practice. What else? My intention, while I'm busy not overextending myself, I really want to create a sort of on-demand course on note-taking. I have an idea for it, like where I could record it and then people could buy it and do it as they want. Because I really love note-taking. It's one of my favorite things to teach, actually. And we will be doing that in, I think it was October, that I'll be having my note-taking webinar. It was one of the fall workshops. No, I think it's November. So I'd recommend you come to that if that's something that you're interested in. But I'd recommend my webinar this fall. I recommend Interpretrain's note-taking manual. And then Acebo also has their consecutive Edge 21. And in there, she has samples of her own note-taking for different practices. And that's really helpful because you can compare what you're doing to what she's doing and go back and do it again. And this is something that maybe people don't say enough when they teach note-taking. But what you should do is do an interpreting exercise, take notes, and then look at your notes and ask yourself what needs to be improved. Go back and do it again. Even if you're interpreting perfectly, like don't even think about how you're interpreting, just look at your notes and ask yourself, are there things that I'm writing down that I shouldn't be? Or should I have used an abbreviation? And really try to make it visual, really try to follow the rules, so to speak, because we all know that we're supposed to interpret with verticality, going top down. We all know that we're supposed to use indentation, and we know it's supposed to be visual. But then when you look at most people's notes, it's left to right and it's a bunch of words. And that's not how we're supposed to take notes. So it's helpful to see an example of what something should look like and then compare what you do to that. Okay, let's see. Yadira did have her hand up, but now I think that she had to hop away. So I'll address the things in the chat and then we can go back to her. Enrique's journey is really good and has immigration terminology. I read that a long time ago. It was really good. And it wasn't in the context of interpreting, but it's interesting you mentioned that. Yeah, that's the one about a little boy, right? Who's trying to get from Honduras to the United States, I think. If that's the same book that I know. Yeah, so cool. Let me actually put that in the recommendations. Enrique's journey. And then Glenda says, you recommended doing Edge 21 Acebo simultaneous lesson 10, practice with names and simul, 13, practice with numbers previously, but besides following the instructions for the aforesaid practices, did you do anything else? Oh, I think I got this question, maybe it was from Yadira, also maybe there was a study group question, but you're saying, okay, so when I practiced with the names and numbers, yeah, I just followed the instructions and I did it over and 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 over again. Like seriously, I think that I did those exercises maybe 25 times. and it really does train your brain to listen for those numbers. You might memorize a couple of them, and so at that point you're not helping your brain anymore, but you're not going to have memorized all of them. If you're still making mistakes, and probably significant mistakes while you do those, then you can still stand to repeat the exercises. So it sharpens your brain. Something I did do when I was studying for my master's degree exit exams is that I would create little audio files for my classmates, and they would do the same for me. And we would say things, it would just be a list of numbers, like March 12th, 1996, or the stock market rose by 7.5%, or it is $125 more than it was last year on June 8th, 1992, or whatever. You're just throwing numbers and names to your classmates, and then they're interpreting it simultaneously, just using your little audio file that's specific to names and numbers. Another one that I have for names and numbers is expanded sequence, and you can actually find me explaining that on YouTube. I'll put that here. expanded sequence, and I'll include that in my follow-up because that's a really good one, and I have the instructions for that online already. Okay, let's see, what other questions are there? I'm interested in note taking. I can never seem to get a system or get a handle on it. Yeah, and it's about putting in the time and understanding. It's two things. It's about understanding overall what good note taking looks like, and then it's putting in the time. It takes time and it takes dedication, it takes practice, and your interpreting gets worse before it gets better because you're distracted. So you do it when you have the time, you don't do it when you're at work. But if you're like, I don't even know what to do, then I would recommend getting Holly Mickelson's CD. I think it is a CD. Maybe they send it as a digital file now, but she actually explains the theory behind how to take notes. And I think it costs like $30. Maybe it's 60, but it's not a ton of money. And she explains the theory, and then you see her taking notes. And seeing that for me anyway was really helpful for understanding where I was going with my notes. And then, so now you know where you're going and you understand that you're right here and you start making steps to get there. Let's see. Okay, so Yadira's question was answered. Awesome. To what extent would you say day-to-day experience in court can prepare you for the FCICE? It's an interesting, it's the same answer as I would give to what extent can it prepare you for any test, which is a lot and a little at the same time. So yes, it'll prepare you. You'll encounter terminology, you'll understand courtroom procedure, you'll have practice. So it helps you in those areas, but it doesn't help you to fine tune. If you're making mistakes in court every day, you're making those mistakes and you don't know what those mistakes are, and you won't know until you record yourself and you listen and you like tweak. And the thing with practices at home is it can be experimental. You can be like, okay, I'm going to try this new technique. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone and I might do a bad job, but I'm going to learn something new, right? At court, you can't do that because you just can't. So yes, it helps you, but you can't rely on it in order to pass the exam. Interpretrain has a numbers practice too. That is correct. And let's see, any suggestions on site translation materials we should be using besides newspaper articles in English and Spanish? Yeah, I would honestly, I never do the newspaper articles, and it's not that they're bad, it's just that there are already resources out there that are specifically made for interpreters where, they're covering the kinds of topics that we need. So I would recommend any of those self-study materials, which include Interpretrain, Acebo. University of Arizona has some. So I would recommend those. With Interpretrains, you're going to be able to get a grade at the end and see how well you did. With all of them, you're going to have some kind of glossary or example interpretation so that you can see where you're going wrong. And with newspapers or other things that you're finding from scratch, you won't have that added bonus. Jimena has her hand up.
Yeah, I just have a suggestion on also studying materials for site translation, which is my weak spot as well. Just recently I was back home, and if you have, people in Latin American countries or Spanish speaking countries, you can ask them for, could you just send me a copy of the rental contract on your apartment, or the lease on your car, or the mortgage, the mortgage documents of your house, your own people, obviously, so it won't be like an information issue. But that's what I did. I just made copies of all my mom's legal documents and stuff, and I sat down and started to translate them. Just translate them, written.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's really cool. Because and they're like, yes, it's not created specifically for interpreters, but there you're getting the actual legalese in context, which is just honestly, like, I did things like that where I would just carry it around and do it as a reading comprehension exercise, because part of site translation is actually just being able to comprehend what is happening. And here you are going to encounter a higher register than on the state exam. So especially high register Spanish can be really intimidating. And if you can take those rental contracts, or if you can, what I did was I searched on Google for criminal codes. And so I found, like, I think Colombia or something like that. And I printed the first 2 pages and I just read it. I didn't do it even as a site translation, but I just made sure that I could understand it. And you start to get less intimidated by that legalese. Yadira, go ahead.
Okay, I apologize. I had a little emergency, so I took off when you answered the question. And I don't know if Glenda's and mine are exactly the same, but my question is, Holly has this lesson 13 on numbers, and she says to do the multiplication tables as they're doing the lesson. And so do you recommend doing the shadowing or the interpreting along, besides doing the multiplication tables, or were you just thinking of the multiplication tables?
I can't remember. Well, no, I think you were. I can't remember what the actual instructions are, but is it to shadow while doing the multiplication tables, or does she just say do the multiplication tables?
She is to listen to the lesson while they're throwing all these numbers at you, and for you to be doing the multiplication table.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So I have to go back and look at it. I don't want to answer this question off the top of my head because I don't want to like just tell you something that I don't actually think.
Okay.
But yeah, now that you're explaining to me, it does make sense that it would be just trying to focus. You're trying to focus on one set of numbers while other numbers are being thrown at you. I would imagine that if you can do shadowing and do the multiplication tables, it would be like a dual task exercise, a very challenging one. I don't see there being anything wrong with that. I'll double check and see, because I think your email's in my inbox, so I'll remember to get back to you. But yeah, I don't see there being anything wrong with turning it into a more complicated dual task exercise.
Okay, thanks.
I did want to throw in the chat, I have a direct link to the webinar at the end of this month for the exam, and you can use your discount on that or on any of the other ones that are this fall. DB. Sorry, I don't know your name.
No, hi, Donald.
Okay.
No, I'm just thinking about what Yadira said about the numbers. And I think, if I remember correctly, is you're doing the multiplication tables because they're numbers while you're shadowing or doing simultaneous, which are words. I don't think you want to mix numbers with numbers, but rather you're doing simultaneous, and it really helps you to focus to do multiplication tables by hand while you're doing your simultaneous, which is language. So two different parts of the brain are being used. Same thing with doodling. If you do depots, it's just a very good thing. They might think, I mean, one time somebody said, I used to close my eyes when I did depots, or I used to doodle. And then at the end, somebody told me, somebody said, oh, that was a very tough depot. And I said, yeah, I know. And then somebody else complained, and they say, well, what do you know? You had your eyes closed half the time, and the other time you were doodling. I said, yes, but did I make a mistake?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. People don't understand what we do.
No, they don't.
But when you doodle, you're doing your simultaneous, whether it's you're in the subway and you're listening to a conversation and you're doing simultaneous in your mind, of what people are saying, or you're watching a TV show, you just doodle and or do multiplication tables, and that helps you focus.
And I am looking at the multiplication tables thing here. So it says, these are the actual instructions. So for everybody's reference, we're talking about Edge 21, Simultaneous, ACEBO. And if you plan on taking this exam, I really recommend you get this. And PS, no, I don't get any kinds of commission from them, even though I've been recommending their materials for years, and I think that I should, but I'll keep recommending them anyway. So the instructions are, as you listen to the passage, recite the multiplication tables out loud. So it's almost like it is an exercise in, like, it's a weird hybrid simultaneous. I don't actually remember doing this. I know I must have, because I recommend these as the practice with numbers, but I'd totally forgotten that this was the instruction. So you're supposed to record yourself and make sure you recite them correctly, and then say them in English when you're listening to English. Okay, I do remember that instruction. So yeah, they're really just seeing, can you stay focused on the multiplication tables while listening to this, the things that you're listening to. But I would also recommend, on top of this, I would recommend just shadowing without the multiplication tables, and then maybe turning it into a dual task. I probably wouldn't try interpreting, because it's not the sort of stuff that you would generally interpret for the exam anyway. I think that your time will be best spent if you follow the original instructions and then you shadow and maybe dual task. And dual task would mean you're actually writing the multiplication tables instead of saying them out loud.
Yeah, I think I was thinking perhaps, I mean, I'm not acquainted with a SEBO, that particular exercise, but I was thinking of something else I learned which is do a manual thing with numbers while you are actually interpreting or shadowing out loud with language.
Yeah, and that's dual task. That's like when they tell you like do a dual task exercise, it means you're shadowing out loud and you're writing maybe numbers 3, 6, 9, like, you know, counting up or back, or you can make it as easy or as hard as you want. Okay,
And could I add one last thing?
go ahead.
You recommended 2 hours a day, and the exam is about an hour and a half. So the good thing about that, doing 2 hours per session, is that you get used to the idea, you know, of building stamina, you
Yeah.
know, for that period of time. So if you're going to run a marathon, if it's a 5-mile marathon, then you probably want to run 7 miles in your training. So always do a little bit extra. But can you talk about mock exams, please?
Exams, let me talk about them. Yes, there aren't too many of them. That's so they're great, and I think you should do as many as you can get your hands on. I think University of Arizona does offer an oral mock exam, and then there's also one on the Prometric website that you can do, I think. There should be links in the resources section of my website, but if you can find them, do them. I would space them out. So don't do them all at once. You know, find the ones that you can, and then maybe do one as a baseline in September when you start studying, and then do another one 2 months later. And yeah, if you can't find them, I know there are some out there. You could always create a mock exam, and this is especially where it becomes helpful if you have a study group or a study buddy, because you can make one for your partner and they can make one for you, and maybe it's just a matter of going through your shared materials and just coming up with a surprise for them that they haven't seen yet. So being like, okay, today we're going to do lab 9 and we're going to out of the Interpretrain materials, or we're going to do exercise 13 out of the Acebo materials, and they don't know yet. So then basically you're proctoring mock exams for each other based on the parameters that were set out. It's great if you can find ones that are already made though, because they can come with scoring units. But I'm seeing Yadira says the University of Arizona does not have scoring units. So everyone knows. That's annoying. Okay. Yeah, I thought that it did. I thought that there was one that came with scoring units. What I can tell you is that if you use Interpretrain's materials, they will give you scores at the end of it based on the challenging vocabulary for that particular lab. So that can be really helpful to chart your progress. Okay. Any other questions or comments? We're going to start wrapping it up soon, but the floor is still open if anybody wanted to cover anything else. Glenda's saying Virginia's material does have scoring units, although she does not have a mock exam. Yeah, that's correct. So it's not set up as a mock exam, but the materials, you can use them kind of like one, and you could even just decide, okay, I'm going to do this one, this one, this one.
Last time I took a mock exam with University of Arizona, but it was like you had to sign up for it, like a workshop.
Mhm.
And so we did the test just like it was. And then a few days later, when they send us the results, we did have the scoring units, and what we said would have been acceptable. But you had to sign up for that day. It was not something that you can purchase and just have it and use it when you want.
Okay,
But
that's good to know though.
that was very useful.
Thank you. Yvette Citizen used to have mock exams she created with her company, but at that time they were very West Coast oriented. Yeah, she has the Confident Interpreter, I think, which is another one that has self-study materials that are really good as well. But I don't know about the mock exams. Okay. right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. It was really nice having you, and thank you for participating and coming with all of your questions and comments. I will be available by email, so if you do have any follow-up, or if you want me to include any of your resources that you mentioned, then you can feel free to just email me. And I saw I already got at least one email. So yeah, I'll send a follow-up email in the next week or so with a link to this recording, so you can go back and watch it whenever you want. And that's all. I hope to see some of you at the end of the month and maybe more of you this fall. And maybe at the ATA, I will be at that conference in October, I think it is. So yeah, I hope to see some of you actually in person one of these decades. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Athena.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.